Hey there, students. If you're following the current American presidential election, then you're probably familiar with the speech that Mitt Romney, who was the 2012 Republican nominee, made last week about Donald Trump. And I'm going to talk about that speech and predict why it ultimately won't matter. Now, how am I going to do this? I'm going to employ historical synthesis, all right? And this is where we get into history as being more than about names and dates, that we study history so that we can put an eye to the present, so to speak, okay? So we can look at similar situations and we can see how those situations played out. And in doing this, when I looked at Mitt Romney's speech and examined the text of it, it reminded me of some other speeches. And in fact, I was able to assign a type to this speech. That is a Philippic. Now, a Philippic is a political speech delivered to condemn a person who is perceived to be a threat to the survival of the state. Now, the great orators of classical history have tried similar tactics before. Demosthenes, the Athenian orator, and Cicero, the Roman orator. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to look at the examples of Demosthenes and Cicero and relate that to what happened last week. So Demosthenes was an Athenian orator who delivered a series of philippics against Philip II of Macedon. Demosthenes was the greatest orator the ancient world had probably ever seen. Plutarch writes some really amazing stuff about Demosthenes and all of the things that he did to become as great of a speaker as he was, which I may treat in another video sometime. But Demosthenes was the greatest Athenian orator, and he saw that Philip II of Macedon was a threat, that Philip was conquering the Greek city-states, and Demosthenes wanted to warn his countrymen that this man is going to destroy Athens. And really, as far as philippics work, there are three ingredients here when we're looking at the three philippics that Demosthenes gave. There was maybe a fourth philippic, but the authorship is disputed. So first of all, Philip II is a threat to the Athenian state. Second, he's a very bad man. Third, he can be defeated through united effort. Now Cicero, the Roman orator, who was really to Rome what Demosthenes was to Greece, he also delivered philippics against Marcus Antonius, who you may know as Mark Antony, but if you went around in ancient Rome looking for Mark Antony, nobody would have known who you were talking about. His name was Marcus Antonius. Now, Cicero delivered not 3, but 14 philippics against Marcus Antonius. He drove his point home pretty hard. Well, being the greatest orator of the Roman state at that time, he said, Antonius is an evil and ambitious man who must be stopped to save the Republic. And Cicero was right that Rome was in the final days of the Republic. Now let's go ahead and turn our attention to Mitt Romney's Philippic. Now Mitt Romney's Philippic had all of these ingredients. Let's look at a couple of excerpts. Here is what I know. Donald Trump is a phony, a fraud, Romney said. His promises are as worthless as a degree from Trump University. That was pretty funny. He's playing the members of the American public for suckers. He gets a free ride to the White House, and all we get is a lousy hat. So this speech by Mitt Romney goes into this category of a philippic because it says that, first of all, Trump is a threat to the GOP and, by extension, to America. That Trump is a very bad man, not somebody we'd want our kids to look up to. And third, that he can be defeated through united effort. Now, what Mitt Romney proposes here is a strategy of unite and conquer. So, you vote for the candidate in each state who is most likely to beat Trump. So, in Florida, you would vote for Marco Rubio. Now, of course, at this point, that remains to be seen how that's going to go in Florida. If you live in Ohio, vote for John Kasich. And if you live in Louisiana, vote for Ted Cruz. That almost worked yesterday in the Louisiana primary. So here is where we begin the process of synthesis that Mitt Romney, like the great orators of classical antiquity, has tried to warn Americans about the threat posed by the Donald Trump candidacy and to try to rally Americans to united effort to defeat it. Well, let's see what happened to Demosthenes and Cicero. Sadly for Demosthenes and Cicero, both of their speeches were ineffective. As great of orators as they were, they did not accomplish their goals of rallying people against their chosen enemies. Here is a painting of the death of Demosthenes. Demosthenes drank poison from a reed before he could be captured by Alexander the Great's soldiers. Now, Demosthenes may be somebody kind of popular with Donald Trump, seeing as he likes people who don't get captured. Cicero was less lucky. Marcus Antonius, after those 14 Philippics, had had enough of Cicero, and he ordered that Cicero not only be beheaded, but that his hands, which wrote the Philippics, also be cut off, and that his head and hands be displayed in the middle of the Roman Forum as a warning to anybody considering making a move against the Second Triumvirate. So what now? Can Mitt Romney stop the Trump train? I'm not so sure about that, because when we look at this, if the greatest orators of the classical era were unable to achieve their desired results through the use of philippics, there is a slim chance that Mitt Romney will be able to do any better. And there's a reason for this, because a philippic is nearly always a last-ditch attempt to stop the seemingly inevitable. So too little, too late in this case, that Mitt Romney is trying to rally people against Donald Trump. But really, while we're using the train analogy, that a philippic is really the oratorical equivalent of standing on a train track and telling everybody that if they get on to that train track with you and they can yell loud enough for it to stop, that train will somehow stop. And frankly, at this point, with the way that this is going, I don't see it happening. And if Trump is stopped, it is probably going to have very little to do with Mitt Romney's speech. Now, thankfully, Mitt will probably get off easy compared to the great classical orators. All that Mitt probably has to worry about is a bunch of tweets like this from @RealDonaldTrump. So I've predicted that Mitt Romney's speech will probably not have much of an effect on this current presidential contest, and I've done that by synthesizing history, by taking other similar examples from history and looking back and applying them to the present. It may not always work, but history is an art, not a science. It doesn't always work, but it's something that is useful as an intellectual exercise as we go about our lives. If you feel like you learned something, you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe. Visit my website, tomrichey.net, Twitter, Instagram, social media, all of that kind of stuff. I'll be back soon with some more videos about history and philosophy and politics and all kinds of other topics. Until next time.